Something happened in a radio interview this week that has Ravens fans buzzing, and it involves Trey Hendrickson, the last player anyone expected Lamar Jackson to get emotional about, a former division rival. Someone who used to make Lamar's life miserable twice a year is now wearing purple and black, and what Lamar said about him caught almost everyone off guard. He didn't just give a polite quote about a new teammate. He used a word that quarterbacks almost never use, and he said it in a way that made it clear he means every bit of it. What exactly did Lamar say about Hendrickson, and why is it turning heads across the entire fan base? That's what we need to get into. Let's start with what actually happened. Lamar sat down with Jacob Hester on SiriusXM NFL radio, and the conversation eventually turned to Trey Hendrickson. Now, if you know anything about Hendrickson's history, you know he spent years torching Ravens tackles as a Cincinnati Bengal. He was a guy opposing quarterbacks dreaded seeing on tape, especially twice a season if he played in the AFC North. That rivalry ran deep, and Hendrickson was a huge part of it. So when Lamar was asked about having Hendrickson on his own team now, you could hear the relief and excitement in his answer. He didn't dance around it. He said, "Just to have him on our side, man, and don't have to face him twice a year, it's extraordinary." Think about that phrase for a second. Extraordinary isn't a word quarterbacks throw around casually. This is a guy who has seen a lot of talent come to the league, and he chose that specific word to describe how he feels about Hendrickson joining the Ravens. That single quote tells you everything about how much respect Lamar has for what Hendrickson brings to the field. This isn't a quarterback being polite about a new signing. This sounds like a guy who genuinely dreaded preparing for Hendrickson twice a year and is thrilled that dread is gone. And if Lamar felt that way as an opponent, imagine how offensive lines around the league are going to feel facing him as a Raven. But this reaction from Lamar doesn't exist in a vacuum. To really get why this signing matters so much, we need to talk about how Hendrickson ended up in Baltimore in the first place, and why this front office decided to make this kind of move. The Ravens brought in Hendrickson through free agency specifically to upgrade the defensive line heading into the season and beyond. This wasn't a small depth signing. This was a targeted move to add a proven, disruptive force to a defense that needed more consistent pressure off the edge. Front offices don't make moves like this lightly, especially when the player is a former interdivisional rival who spent his career trying to beat you. Getting a player like Hendrickson away from a division rival carries extra weight. It's not just about adding a good player. It's about subtracting a problem that used to exist twice a year on the schedule. Every Ravens fan who remembers watching Hendrickson wreck a game plan against Baltimore knows exactly what the signing means on a football level. He's a soon-to-be 10-year veteran, which tells you he's not just talented. He's experienced and battle-tested against the exact kind of offenses he'll now be helping to shut down. When you flip a player like that from opponent to teammate, it changes two things at once. Your defense gets stronger, and a division rival's offense loses with the guys who used to make life miserable for opposing quarterbacks. That's a 2-for-1 swing that front offices dream about, and Lamar clearly understands the value of that shift better than most, since he's the one who had to deal with Hendrickson as an opponent. And that's exactly why his reaction carries so much weight. This isn't some analyst breaking down tape from the outside. This is a guy who had to actually stand in the pocket and deal with Hendrickson coming off the edge. So when Lamar says it's extraordinary to have him on his side now, he's speaking from real experience, not just hype. That personal history is what makes his comments hit different, and it sets up the next part of what he said, which might be even more telling, because Lamar didn't just talk about the past. He talked about what Hendrickson is doing right now in training camp, and that part of the interview might actually be the most important piece of information for Ravens fans heading into the season. Lamar made it clear that Hendrickson isn't just a name on the roster. He's already making an impact in practice, and according to Lamar, that impact is not subtle at all. He described Hendrickson as making life difficult on offense during training camp, and he didn't hold back on how intense that experience has been for him and the rest of the offensive unit. Think about what it means for a starting quarterback to publicly admit that a new defensive teammate is giving the offense trouble in camp. Quarterbacks usually protect their offense in interviews. They don't go out of their way to hype up how hard practice has been unless it's genuinely notable. So when Lamar openly says Hendrickson is causing problems for his own offense right now, that's a real signal about the level Hendrickson is playing at. Lamar's exact words paint a pretty vivid picture. He called Hendrickson a wreck, and he said Hendrickson is doing the job at a high pace. Those aren't polite, generic compliments. Those are the words of someone who has watched this guy line up across from Baltimore's offensive line and consistently win those reps. And the fact that he's doing it early in camp, before the pads are even fully cracking in real games, says a lot about his motor and his conditioning heading into year 10. This is where the story starts connecting the dots. A player who used to give Lamar nightmares as an opponent is now giving his own offensive line trouble in practice. That's not a coincidence. That's consistency. Hendrickson brought the same relentless approach with him to Baltimore that made him a problem in Cincinnati. And now it's the Ravens' offense feeling it firsthand before opposing teams ever get the chance. And if he's already this disruptive against his own team in camp, you have to start wondering what that's going to look like once the regular season hits, and he's lined up against opposing tackles who haven't seen him every single day. That question is exactly where Lamar's comments take an even more interesting turn, because he didn't just talk about what Hendrickson is doing to the Ravens' offense. He talked about what's coming for everybody else. Lamar made a direct connection between what he's seeing in practice and what opposing offenses are about to experience this season. He said Hendrickson is going to make things difficult for the teams the Ravens face, and given what Lamar described happening in camp, that's not just a hopeful prediction. It's based on what he's watching with his own eyes every day. This is the part where the earlier comment about not having to face Hendrickson twice a year really comes full circle. Lamar isn't just relieved for himself anymore. He's essentially warning the rest of the league. If Hendrickson is disruptive enough to bother a Ravens offense that knows his tendencies and prepares for him daily, imagine the problems he's going to cause for opposing offensive lines seeing him for the first time on a Sunday. There's also a bigger picture element here worth talking about. Adding a proven pass rusher like Hendrickson doesn't just help in one game. It changes how opposing coordinators have to game plan every single week. Extra attention on Hendrickson can open things up elsewhere on the defensive line, which is exactly the kind of ripple effect Ravens fans have wanted from this front office for a while now. So when Lamar talks about Hendrickson making life difficult for opposing offenses, he's not just hyping up a teammate for the sake of a good soundbite. He's describing a shift in how this defense could operate as a whole. And that shift starts with the tone Hendrickson has already set in camp, which brings us to what might be the most telling detail from this entire interview. Lamar didn't just praise Hendrickson's talent. He repeated himself for emphasis, and that repetition says a lot about how genuinely happy he is about this addition to the roster. Twice in this interview, Lamar said, "I'm glad he's on our team." Not once, but twice back-to-back. That kind of repetition isn't an accident in an interview. When someone repeats a phrase like that, it usually means they're trying to make sure the message lands, that the feeling behind it is real and not just a passing compliment. Then Lamar closed things out by saying he loves it. And he said that twice as well. I love it. I love it, though. Again, that's not typical quarterback speak. That's someone genuinely fired up about a teammate's impact, even if that impact is currently making his own life harder in practice. There's something almost funny about a quarterback being thrilled that a player is giving him trouble in camp, but that's exactly the kind of reaction that tells you how much confidence Lamar has in what this signing brings to the team. This matters beyond just one interview. Locker room chemistry and belief in your teammates can genuinely affect how a season plays out. When your franchise quarterback is this openly excited about a new addition to the defense, it sends a message throughout the entire roster. It builds trust in the coaching staff's decisions and in the direction this team is heading. And that's really the bigger takeaway here. This wasn't just Lamar complimenting a new player, because that's what you're supposed to do in interviews. This was a genuine, repeated, almost giddy reaction from a quarterback who knows exactly what Hendrickson is capable of, because he used to be on the receiving end of it. That kind of authentic excitement from a leader like Lamar tends to spread, and it's worth watching how that energy carries into the regular season. So let's step back and look at what we actually have here. Lamar Jackson, a guy who had to deal with Hendrickson twice a year as a division opponent, is now watching him wreak havoc in Ravens practices. He called the whole situation extraordinary, described Hendrickson as a wreck in the best possible way, and repeated multiple times just how glad he is to have him on this roster. What this really signals for Baltimore is a defense that could look significantly different than what we saw before. Adding a proven, disruptive edge rusher with nearly a decade of experience isn't just about one position group getting better. It's about changing the math for opposing offensive coordinators every single week. And based on what Lamar is describing from camp, that change is already showing up before the season has even started. Now it's your turn to weigh in. Do you think Trey Hendrickson is going to be the difference maker this Ravens defense has been missing this season?
And if you're a true Ravens fan and love keeping up with everything happening around the team, don't leave this video without sharing it with a friend who's just as passionate. They're definitely going to enjoy this. See those videos on your screen right now? I picked the first one especially for you, and the other is recommended by YouTube. Go check them out and I'll see you in the next video.